I'm not looking for trouble. What did you say to me?
They said he wouldn't last a week. The new black kid with the quiet eyes and worn-out backpack. They circled him like wolves, their laughter echoing across the parking lot as the sun dipped below the horizon. He stood there, calm as still water, while fists clenched and threats flew. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know, was that those hands had broken boards thicker than their ignorance, that those feet had moved faster than their hatred. In 60 seconds, everything they believed about who deserved respect was about to shatter like glass. But how did it come to this? And what happened when the first punch was thrown?
Marcus Williams arrived at Riverside High on a Tuesday morning in October, carrying everything that mattered in a Navy backpack that had seen better days. His mother had gotten a nursing position at County General, which meant leaving their old neighborhood, their old life, and the only dojo where Marcus had felt truly at home. He was 14, with deep brown eyes that absorbed everything and revealed nothing, a habit developed from moving 3 times in 4 years. The school hallways smelled like floor wax and teenage anxiety. Marcus navigated them with the same awareness his sensei had drilled into him since he was 7. Observe everything, react to nothing, stay centered. He noticed the way conversations paused when he walked by, the sideways glances, the way some students shifted their backpacks to the opposite shoulder, as if proximity to him required precaution. In homeroom, Mrs. Patterson introduced him with the practiced enthusiasm of someone who'd done this 100 times. "Class, this is Marcus Williams. Let's make him feel welcome." 28 pairs of eyes assessed him. Most looked away quickly. A few nodded. 3 students in the back row, 2 boys and a girl, exchanged looks that Marcus cataloged and filed away. By lunch, Marcus had learned the school's geography, the cafeteria's social hierarchy, the bathroom where freshmen got shaken down, the spot behind the gym where students vaped between classes. He had also learned that Riverside High was 92% white, and that being one of 6 black students meant carrying an extra weight that never showed up on any scale. He sat alone at lunch, which didn't bother him. What bothered him was the waste, the half-eaten meals thrown away while his mother worked double shifts to keep their lights on, the casual abundance that surrounded him like oxygen, invisible to everyone who'd never gone without. "That seat's taken," a voice interrupted his thoughts. Marcus looked up to find a tall white kid with perfectly gelled hair and a Letterman jacket that seemed surgically attached to his shoulders. 2 others flanked him like backup dancers. "Doesn't look taken," Marcus replied evenly, not moving. "I'm Blake Henderson. My dad's on the school board. That makes it taken." He smiled, but his eyes stayed cold. "Maybe you didn't get the memo about how things work here?" Marcus felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the way air got thick when you knew what was coming. He'd been here before, in different schools with different Blakes, who all wore the same expression of inherited entitlement. "I got it," Marcus said, standing up, not because Blake Henderson's father sat on some board, but because his sensei's voice echoed in his head. "Pick your battles. Not every challenge deserves a response." As Marcus walked away, he heard Blake's laughter follow him like exhaust fumes. "Yeah, that's what I thought. Welcome to Riverside, new kid." The rest of the day passed in a blur of teachers' names he'd forget and lessons he'd already mastered at his old school. In 6th period English, a girl named Sophie smiled at him, genuinely smiled, the kind that reached her eyes. It was enough to remind him that not everyone here was Blake Henderson. After school, Marcus found a quiet spot in the library and researched local martial arts schools on his phone. His mother couldn't afford lessons now, not with the move and the new apartment's security deposit, but he could practice the forms on his own. The discipline had become part of his breathing. Without it, he felt unmoored, a ship without an anchor. At 6:47 p.m., Marcus left through the library's side exit, taking the shortcut through the parking lot that would shave 10 minutes off his walk home. The October air had teeth in it, and the street lights were just flickering to life, casting long shadows across the asphalt. That's when he heard them. Voices. Laughter. The particular brand of cruelty that teenage boys unleash when they think no one's watching. And there, in the amber glow of the parking lot lights, Marcus saw them waiting.
3 figures materialized from behind a black pickup truck like predators emerging from tall grass. Blake Henderson stood in the center, flanked by his friends, Connor, a stocky kid with a buzz cut, and Tyler, lankier but no less threatening. They'd positioned themselves between Marcus and the parking lot exit, a tactical move that wasn't accidental. "Look who took the scenic route home," Blake called out, his voice carrying that particular tone of false friendliness that always preceded something ugly. Marcus stopped walking, his body automatically shifting into a neutral stance, feet shoulder-width apart, weight balanced, hands relaxed at his sides. To anyone watching, he simply looked like a kid who'd paused, but every muscle in his body had quietly engaged, ready. "I'm just heading home," Marcus said, his voice level. "Through our parking lot?" Connor stepped forward, cracking his knuckles in an exaggerated gesture. "Nobody said you could use our parking lot." "It's a school parking lot. It's everyone's." The logic meant nothing. Marcus knew it wouldn't. This had never been about parking lots or shortcuts. It had been building all day, probably before he even walked through Riverside High's doors. He represented something to them, a disruption in their carefully ordered world, a reminder that their bubble wasn't the whole universe. "You've got an attitude problem," Blake said, moving closer. The 3 of them formed a semicircle now, boxing Marcus in against a row of cars. "You come into our school, sit at our tables, and now you're talking back? Maybe someone needs to teach you some respect." "Respect goes both ways," Marcus said quietly. Tyler laughed, a sharp bark that echoed off the cars. "Listen to this guy. You think you're tough? You think you're going to last here?" Marcus said nothing. His sensei's words cycled through his mind. Silence is not weakness. Stillness is not surrender. The warrior who doesn't need to prove himself is the most dangerous kind. But Blake wasn't interested in philosophy. He stepped directly into Marcus's space, close enough that Marcus could smell the energy drink on his breath. "Let me tell you how this works, new kid. People like you don't get to just show up and act like you belong. You earn it. And right now, you haven't earned shit." "People like me?" Marcus repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "Don't play stupid." Blake's mask slipped for just a second, revealing the raw prejudice underneath. "You know exactly what I mean. This is Riverside. We've got a certain standard here, a certain way of doing things, and you don't fit." There it was, the thing that had been hovering over every interaction since that morning, finally spoken out loud. The parking lot suddenly felt colder, the shadows deeper. Marcus's heart was hammering, but his breathing remained controlled. 4 counts in. Hold for 7. 8 counts out. The breathing technique his sensei had taught him for moments exactly like this. So what happens now? You beat up the new kid to prove what exactly? That you're tough? That you're in charge? Connor shifted his weight, clearly ready for violence. "Maybe we just don't like your attitude." Or maybe, and there was steel in his voice now, "you don't like that I'm not afraid of you." The words hung in the air like smoke. Blake's jaw clenched. He was used to fear. It was his currency, the thing that made him matter in the rigid social hierarchy of high school. Without it, he was just another kid whose biggest accomplishment was being born to the right parents. "You should be afraid," he hissed, and suddenly his hands were on Marcus's chest, shoving hard. Marcus could have held his ground. His stance was solid, his center low, but he let himself stumble backward, hitting the car behind him with a metallic thump. The tactical part of his brain was calculating angles, distances, escape routes. 3 opponents. 2 had no training. Their stances were all wrong, weight distribution terrible. Blake maybe had taken some wrestling, judging by how he'd pushed, but none of them had ever been in a real fight. "What's wrong?" Blake taunted, moving in again. "I thought you weren't scared." Marcus's hands were shaking now, not from fear, from restraint. Every instinct, every hour of training, every muscle memory was screaming at him to move, to defend, to counter. He could disable Blake in 3 strikes. Connor would go down with a simple sweep. Tyler would probably run. But then what? If he fought back, he became the story, the aggressive black kid who attacked 3 innocent white students in a parking lot. Never mind who started it. Never mind the words that preceded the violence. He'd seen this movie before, lived it in different variations. The script was always the same, and people who looked like him always lost. Nothing to say? Blake was right in his face now, emboldened by Marcus's apparent passivity. "You're all talk." Just another what? The voice came from behind them, sharp and clear. All 4 boys turned. Sophie from English class stood at the edge of the parking lot, her phone raised and pointed directly at them. The little red light of a recording blinked in the gathering darkness like a warning. "I asked you a question, Blake. Just another what? Why don't you finish that sentence?" Blake's face went red. "This doesn't concern you, Sophie." "Actually, it does. Because I've been watching 3 of you corner 1 kid, and I've been recording the whole thing, including the part where you put your hands on him first." She looked at Marcus. "You okay?" Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. Connor took a step towards Sophie. "You better delete that." "Or what? You'll assault me too? In front of witnesses?" She gestured to the parking lot, where a few other students had emerged from various buildings, drawn by the commotion. "Go ahead. Make my day. I'm sure the police will love to see this footage. So will the school board. Isn't your dad on that, Blake?" The power dynamic shifted, like tectonic plates. Blake looked around at the growing audience, at the phone still recording, at Marcus, who hadn't thrown a single punch despite every provocation. The story was slipping away from him, transforming from teaching the new kid a lesson into something he couldn't control. "This isn't over," Blake muttered, but he was already backing away. "I think it is." Connor and Tyler followed Blake towards the pickup truck, throwing threatening looks over their shoulders that held no real weight. Marcus watched them go, his body still coiled tight, adrenaline coursing through his system with nowhere to go. The other students dispersed, the show over, already pulling out their phones to spread the story. In this school, information traveled at the speed of social media. Sophie lowered her phone and walked over to Marcus. "I'm sorry that happened." "Not your fault," managed. "Maybe, but I should have said something earlier. In the cafeteria when he—" She stopped, shaking her head. "I'm sorry." Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. The guilt in her eyes was genuine. "You showed up when it mattered. That's what counts." "You didn't fight back," Sophie observed. "Why not?" It was a complicated question with an even more complicated answer. Because fighting back would have played into every stereotype. Because winning would have made him a threat, and losing would have made him a target. Because his mother had enough to worry about without getting calls from the principal. Because he'd learned too young that justice and consequences followed different rules depending on your skin color. Because Marcus said, simply, "I didn't have to." Sophie nodded slowly, like she understood the layers beneath those words. "Walk you home?" "I'm good," Marcus said. But then he added, "Thanks, really." As Sophie headed towards the parking lot exit, Marcus finally allowed himself to move, to breathe, to uncoil the tension that had built up in every muscle. His hands were still trembling, not from fear, but from the monumental effort of restraint. He'd survived his first day at Riverside High, but as he started his walk home through streets that still felt foreign, Marcus knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was only the beginning.
The video went viral overnight. By Thursday morning, Riverside Parking Lot Confrontation had been viewed 47,000 times across 3 platforms. The comments section became a battleground. Some people praising Sophie for intervening, others defending Blake, still others analyzing Marcus's restraint frame by frame like a sports replay. By Friday, the school administration could no longer ignore it. Principal Hendricks called all 4 boys into his office at 10:15 a.m., pulling them from third period. The office smelled like old coffee and institutional carpet, and the fluorescent lights hummed with a frequency that made Marcus's teeth ache. Blake sat on one side of the room with Connor and Tyler, their parents already present, Mr. Henderson in his expensive suit, Connor's father in his police uniform, Tyler's mother with her lawyer-sharp expression. They looked like a defense team, unified and prepared. Marcus sat alone on the other side. His mother couldn't take time off work. She'd already missed too many days during the move. The asymmetry wasn't lost on anyone in the room. "Gentlemen," Principal Hendrick began, settling into his chair with the weariness of someone who dealt with these situations too many times. "We've reviewed the video multiple times. We've taken statements. Now I need to hear from each of you directly." "This is ridiculous," Mr. Henderson interrupted. "My son and his friends were simply having a conversation with this young man. A conversation that involved physical contact," Principal Hendricks cut him off, his voice firmer than Marcus expected. "Initiated by your son on school grounds." "Barely school grounds," Connor's father said. "That parking lot is technically, it's within our jurisdiction, Officer Reynolds." The principal's jaw was tight. "And even if it wasn't, we have a zero-tolerance policy for bullying and violence." "Violence?" Blake's mother spoke up for the first time. "Blake didn't hurt anyone. If anything, this boy could have defended himself. The fact that he didn't suggests—" "Suggests what, Mrs. Henderson?" Marcus heard himself speaking before he'd made the conscious decision to do so. All eyes turned to him. "That you should have fought back. That would have made this easier for you, wouldn't it?" The room went silent. "Marcus," Principal Hendricks said carefully, "what do you mean by that?" And suddenly everything Marcus had been holding back, every move school, every suspicious glance, every conversation where people spoke about him like he wasn't there, came pouring out. "I mean that if I'd thrown a single punch, we wouldn't be having a debate about zero tolerance. I'd already be expelled, maybe arrested." He looked at Connor's father. "We all know how that would have gone. But because I stood there and took it, because I let myself get pushed and threatened and surrounded, now suddenly it's complicated. Now we need to hear both sides. Now it's just boys being boys." "That's not fair," Tyler's mother protested. "Fair?" Marcus's voice cracked. "I've been at this school for 3 days. 3 days. And I already know which bathrooms to avoid, which hallways to take, which people to make myself small around. You want to talk about fair?" "Marcus has a point," Principal Hendricks said quietly. "He's making this about race when it isn't," Mr. Henderson snapped. "This is about a new student who came in with an attitude." "What attitude? Eating lunch? Walking through a parking lot? Existing? What exactly did I do that deserved 3 people cornering me and telling me I don't belong here?" Blake finally spoke, his voice smaller than in the parking lot. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did. You meant every word. You just didn't mean for anyone to see it." The principal's office felt too small suddenly, the walls pressing in. Marcus could feel his heart hammering against his ribs, could feel years of swallowed words and bitten tongues and careful neutrality finally exploding outward. Every school I go to, there's someone like you, Marcus continued, looking directly at Blake now. Someone who's decided before I even walk in that I don't belong, that I need to be tested, proven, put in my place. And I'm tired. I'm so tired of having to be twice as good to be considered half as worthy, of having to control myself when you get to lose control, of being expected to take whatever you dish out with a smile because defending myself makes me dangerous. Marcus, Principal Hendricks started, I'm not dangerous, and his voice broke on the last word. I'm just tired. The silence that followed felt like the moment before thunder. Then, something unexpected happened. Officer Reynolds cleared his throat and spoke directly to his son. Connor, is what he's saying true? Did you corner this kid? Connor looked at the floor. The cracks were starting to show. And in that moment, Marcus realized something profound. His restraint hadn't been weakness. It had been the most powerful choice he could have made. Because now, finally, people were listening.
The meeting lasted another 45 minutes. Blake, Connor, and Tyler received 3-day suspensions and mandatory counseling. Marcus received an apology from Principal Hendricks that, while sincere, couldn't undo the exhaustion that had settled into his bones. But something else happened in the days that followed. Sophie started a conversation about the incident in her English class that spread through the school like wildfire. Students who'd witnessed it, students who'd experienced similar things, students who'd stayed silent too many times, they all started talking. The parking lot confrontation became a mirror that Riverside High could no longer avoid looking into. A week after the incident, Marcus found a note in his locker, then another, then 17 more. Some were apologies, some were thanks for speaking up, some were stories from other students about their own experiences with Blake and his friends. Each one was a crack in the foundation of how things worked at Riverside High. 2 weeks later, the school board, Blake's father included, implemented new anti-bullying protocols and mandatory implicit bias training for students and staff. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't enough. But it was something. Marcus's mother finally heard the full story a month after the incident, when she had a rare evening off, and he couldn't keep it contained anymore. She held him while he cried, and when he was done, she said something he'd never forget. Baby, they wanted you to fight so they could call you violent. They wanted you to be silent so they could call you complicit. Instead, you stood in that parking lot and showed them a third way. You showed them that strength isn't always loud, and power isn't always fists. I'm so proud of you. The dojo Marcus eventually found, 3 bus rides away from his apartment, became his sanctuary again. His mother couldn't afford regular lessons, but the sensei, an older Japanese man named Nakamura, who'd seen his share of discrimination, offered him a work-study arrangement. Marcus cleaned the mats, organized equipment, and in return, he trained. Blake Henderson never spoke to Marcus again, but Marcus would sometimes catch him watching from across the cafeteria, something unreadable in his expression. Maybe it was resentment. Maybe it was shame. Maybe it was the uncomfortable recognition that the world wasn't as simple as he'd been raised to believe. By winter break, Marcus had found his rhythm at Riverside High. He'd made real friends, Sophie and her crew, a kid named David from his math class, even a few of the athletes who'd quietly respected his restraint in the parking lot. The stairs in the hallway didn't stop completely, but they changed. Some became curiosity. Some became respect. And when a freshman, a black girl named Jasmine who just transferred in, got cornered by a group of students in the library, it was 3 of Marcus's new friends who intervened. No violence, no threats, just witnesses with phones and voices saying, "Not here, not anymore." Marcus realized then that the parking lot confrontation hadn't been the end of something. It had been the beginning. On the last day before winter break, Marcus stood in that same parking lot where it all happened. The December cold bit through his jacket, and the street lights were already on, even though it was only 4 p.m. He could still see exactly where he'd stood, where Blake had pushed him, where Sophie had appeared like an answer to a prayer he hadn't known he was praying. His phone buzzed. A text from his sensei. Remember, the warriors' greatest victory is the battle they never had to fight. Marcus typed back, I remember. As he walked home through the familiar now streets, Marcus thought about all the black kids and all the schools across all the cities who were fighting their own parking lot battles. Some would have phones recording, some wouldn't. Some would have Sophie showing up. Some would stand alone. But all of them would have to make the same impossible calculation he'd made: how to survive in a world that saw their existence as provocation. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. But it was real. And the only way forward was to keep standing, keep speaking, keep refusing to become the story they wanted to tell about you. So here's what I'm asking you, everyone watching this. When you see someone being cornered, in a parking lot, in a hallway, online, anywhere, what will you do? Will you pull out your phone like Sophie? Will you use your voice? Or will you be another person who saw something and did nothing?